sounds like this is our last question. I don't understand how we're going to do anything different, as some of the folks running would suggest, while relying on the same old, there's crime, we need more police attitude. More money to law enforcement doesn't make healthier, safer communities. It only locks up more Black and brown kids and young people. How are you going to push back to that sentiment for some folks who think we need to hire more police and arrest more people, that that is the only way to make us feel safer? Because we lock up more folks in the US, disproportionately brown and Black folks, and more numbers and higher rates than any other nation on earth, and we still have intolerable rates of crime.
That's the question of the night right there. It's about mass incarceration. You know, I think about violence. This form of violence that's happening is the same form of violence that was happening during the crack epidemic, where I lost my family, heroin epidemic. Someone has to get locked up. But we also need to make sure that as we think about policing, we don't have to think about incarceration. I think a lot of times that we don't have enough people out in our beats. We have about one police officer per beat. What happens if they go to a different beat to help someone else? They leave susceptible and open. I think visibility is also can be utilized as we're talking about police. But I would like to talk about prevention before we get to intervention, and policing and just out in the community, talking to residents, being visible is a level of policing or peace officer that I really see before we get to the level of policing where someone has to be pulled over, arrested, and put in jail. Let's start to think about things holistically, but it doesn't mean that we don't need them. I said 1,200 for my number, and people were like, well, why that number? That's a real high number. I know the chief wants this number. Oakland historically has had issues with police. It has had issues and challenges with police staffing. I expect there to be peace here and our numbers to grow. If we grow our city to 500,000, we're going to need more police, just because of sheer number. Oakland isn't just, we know our Oakland borders, but now we have apartment buildings, 18, 19 floors. Just like the fire department needs have changed for structures, police has to change for structures as well. So it's not just thinking about police as someone who's going to arrest. I'd like to use police in different ways, making sure that there's less overtime, making sure that they have rest, making sure that they have proper training. Because as we have mass incarceration talk, we also need to make sure that we're pulling over, we're arresting, or we're doing things that we have a balance and a trust level there. Because if we don't, we're just going to send ourselves way back.
Right now, the number of officers we have budgeted is 737. If we do move to 1,200, that's going to require an investment of almost $120 million. Is that money going to come from our fire department? Is that money going to come from road paving, from homelessness services, from the Department of Violence Prevention? There are many political candidates out here right now talking about numbers. This is the ideal number that we need to get to keep us safe. But that's a premature conversation before we even get the officers that we have right now to the level that's budgeted, and we're 80 officers short. So in order to address violence prevention holistically, we need to stop framing the question of, are you a defunder or are you a pro-cop person? Are you pro-public safety? Personally, yes, I believe in having law enforcement and I support our police. And throughout my career as a domestic violence advocate and lawyer, I've worked very collaboratively with OPD and other police departments before. But at the same time, we need to make sure we're investing in community policing and neighborhood safety. Right now, our criminal justice system is founded upon this concept that we are of punishment. So that the first thing when you go to court, when you're told you did something wrong, was I didn't do it, so that you can get away with the least amount of punishment. Why can't we shift this flawed system to accountability, to being able to come forward and say, yes, I acknowledge the harm that I caused, and here are the ways that I can make sure that I'm held accountable. I used to serve on the board of an organization based in East Oakland called Men Creating Peace. And I mentioned I worked with domestic violence survivors. This was focused on domestic violence perpetrators. And the reason this program was so successful in reforming not just individuals and families and neighborhoods and communities, which to me is the basis of violence prevention, but it used a restorative justice approach because it was led by men who formerly perpetrated violence. And there's no better person. I can sit up here all day talking about what someone needs to do to reform themselves and not be abusive. But if you have someone in someone's shoes saying, this is how we change our families, our neighborhoods, and the city of Oakland, that's going to be more impactful. So I see the role of city council as not telling people what to do and not telling people how to change their lives, but uplifting and listening and empowering the change makers who are already doing that work here.